View from the Gutters, episode 56. Welcome to View from the Gutters, the comic book podcast where each episode we discuss a collected edition, trade paperback, or graphic novel, and then recommend and vote on the book for the next episode. Warning: the discussion portion of this show has massive spoilers for that book. On this episode, we discuss The Adventures of Superhero Girl. And, to skip ahead to the recommendation section, skip to 111.10. He's pronounced Namor.
Namor. He is.
N''M-O-R.
Yeah.
I am Namor.
Namor.
It's like s'more. Namor.
S'more. Is that how you spell s'more? Is there an apostrophe in s'more?
Yes.
S''M-O-R-E.
Is it?
It's, can I have s'more?
It's not really.
No,
Is
yes,
it really?
it is.
That's a terrible name for a dessert. That's literally it's just like, that's what we should just call dessert. Just all dessert should
Can
be
the
called
episode
s'more.
open with you complaining about s'mores?
Yeah, sure.
That's great.
I'm just, why is that? That cannot possibly be the
Okay,
name.
you're skipping completely past the part where you take a stick off the ground where it
Yeah.
probably has poop on it and putting marshmallow on
No,
it.
you put
cooking
it in
it
the
for
fire
like
First of all,
1/2 of 1 second until it's black on the outside.
No.
And then fucking
I
like
have
jamming it in between
I
You
have
grew up
chocolate
in rural
and graham crackers.
Pennsylvania.
I have
How do you
many
not know how to
problems with
properly
this.
make a fucking
One,
s'more?
you should get a stick that does not have poop on it.
Yeah.
Not all sticks have poop.
All sticks have poop on them.
Two.
It is outdoors on the ground.
Not everything
Literally-
outside has poop on it.
Literally,
First of all-
there's just a patina of poop on every surface
not true.
that
You
is
can break
outside.
them off
That is
a
not
tree.
true. You could get it off a tree, which is rude to
And
the
then you
tree,
put
but
it in
fine.
the coals for a few
You
minutes to
first you carve it.
Yeah.
You carve the bark and poop off, and then you put
and
it
then
in
you
the
harden
fire.
it, and then you tie the
You
flint
fire
end to
harden
it,
it,
and then
no.
you hunt the wild marshmallows.
No, and then you put a shitty marshmallow on it, which is the worst dessert ever invented. They're awful. And then you get it shitty brown, nice brown color. And then you put it between some chocolate, which is gross, and a graham cracker, which is not even a dessert. That's a health food. with
Okay, I
honey
will
in it.
not stand here and listen to you besmirch the name of chocolate.
It's not. Well, one, I'm like mildly allergic to it, so it tastes
Really?
funny. Yeah. And two, it's not that
I
great.
am so sorry for you.
Everybody
It is
in the world
great.
needs to get off their chocolate high horse. It's a shitty dessert.
It's
But
not.
we can agree
It's
on
fucking,
that now.
It's very good for you on
It's
many
not.
different ways.
It's
Yes,
gross.
No, it is.
It's not. It's not good.
It's filled with
it's
all kinds
delicious.
of. It has a huge amount of nutritional.
What kind of
benefits.
chocolate do you like?
I like good chocolate.
Yeah, like Champlain chocolate for me.
Yeah,
like
like dark.
87%
Whoop,
dark
whoop,
chocolate.
Dark
Dark
chocolate. I like dark
I
chocolate.
like right around 56 is I think is a good percentage. After like
You are a weak-willed
70
man.
something gets a little too complex.
I
for
like
me.
the
just
chalky,
don't
like
know.
90, like the
I just
dirt,
like raw cacao beans. Is
the
really
90.
what I like.
Have you ever had?
Just baking chocolate.
Yeah, have you ever had dark chocolate that is like 90% dark chocolate?
I've
It's
had the
literally
80
just
is-
dirt.
I like the 87%.
It's dirt.
Like the super dark stuff.
It's just dirt at that point.
Yeah, it's barely even. It's
just-
barely even. It's just the cocoa solids.
Yeah, it's gross.
That's
delicious.
That's just it.
Disgusting.
Welcome to View from the Gutters.
Welcome
Yeah.
to View.
Episode whatever.
Welcome to
I don't remember.
Elseworld's View from the Gutters, where we talk about
We talk about
chocolate
how
and don't
shitty
give a shit
chocolate and s'mores
about
are.
comic books.
I'm just saying that some more should be the name of all dessert because you're always like, oh, I'd have some more. Like, I've never asked for a second s'more, but I've asked for extra milkshake or another piece of cake or pie.
As we have established, you don't like chocolate.
Yeah, but also s'mores are like, it's all that effort, and then you eat one, and you're like, eh. And then you don't have another one. Who makes a second s'more?
But
did.
I
then
eat
people
like 5
make
or
them-
6 at a
Really? Oh my
time.
God.
What the hell is
I
up
have
with you?
exactly 2.
People like Martha Stewart come up with novel ways of making them in her oven, and then you can just eat them.
What's the purpose of making a s'more
I was
in
an
the oven?
ADD
Because
kid when I was
no
camping,
bugs.
so
There are
like
no
I would
bugs.
like eat as much sugar as I can, and then like run up the side of a fucking mountain.
I hate marshmallows, too. They're awful.
I have no problem with marshmallows.
How do you guys feel about Peeps?
I hate them.
I'm not a fan.
Yeah, they're gross.
I'm
They are
not a
gross.
fan.
You know, I've always wanted to
but I
try
don't
the
think
deep
that's a
fried
marshmallow
peeps that people
problem.
are always talking about.
That sounds... you can't see my face on this audio, but I made a puking
Like
face.
I don't like
It is literally
Peeps,
purple with rage
but
and disgust.
I don't know. Like people on the internet, they talk about like how good fried peeps are, and it's like,
Right.
what the fuck?
Cade, it's
People on
the
the internet
internet.
also like are awful in general. Our audience excluded.
Hey, we're on the internet.
Yeah. I rest my case.
Yeah,
All right,
you're
that's
talking
fair.
about an organization that let us have a show.
That's
Yeah.
well. They didn't. No one let us have a show. We were like, we're having one, and
Yeah,
no
but
one
we
stopped
haven't
us.
been. The internet police have not yet stopped
Yeah.
us.
Who did I file an application with?
I don't know.
I sent it to the internet.
Dear internet,
Dear internet,
please host our
I'd
show.
like a show on the internet and also a pony.
Yeah, that pony's in the mail. I'm
Well,
convinced.
yeah, you got.
It's going to come any day.
You got the
Ah.
IKEA meatballs, right?
Well, can you can't order those, right? You have to go to IKEA to
No,
get
I think
those.
you can order them on the
Really?
website. I'm almost positive you can. And
I don't. I've never been to IKEA.
What?
Oh my
I never
God.
have either.
It's a beautiful maze of
It's a wonderful,
sleek.
There's a
Swedish
reason
furniture.
Jonathan
I've
Colton
never
wrote a
been
song
to
about
Disney
it.
World either. I'm assuming they're roughly the same.
No, IKEA is much better than Disney World. Fuck
Yeah,
that place.
Disney World is.
I've never
lame.
been to Disney World. I've been to Disneyland though.
Disneyland is cool.
Nah,
Cheap knockoff.
I don't.
Of IKEA?
Yeah. Why not?
Sure. What are we talking about today?
We
We're
are
talking
talking about
about-
the Adventures of Superhero
Yeah,
Girl.
Toby, you.
And this is episode 65,
I don't know.
and I'm Tobiah Panshin.
Yeah, I'm not doing that today.
I'm Andrew Chard.
Yeah, I'm Joe Preti.
And I'm Cade Reynolds.
Sweet.
There. That's all it takes.
All right.
God damn it! I hate cars.
Yes. Oh, your hate of the movie Cars fuels my inner stuff. Now
We're
I am.
both terrible at this.
Now I feel more alive because of your uncomfortable hatred of things that are shitty.
The great thing is the chart just doing this monotone. It's just like
That's what Joe sounds like.
I'm very even-tempered.
He doesn't pronounce words cool like I do,
I don't say things like TV and DVD
and ridiculous.
and ridiculous. I do apparently say all right, though, instead of all right.
I
I couldn't hear the difference
wait.
between those
What did
things.
you say?
I've
All
said
right.
I
All
on
right.
this show
Oh,
before.
so
All
there's
right.
like 2 R's in it.
Yeah.
Like AR apostrophe. Right?
I was raised by pirates. It's not my fault.
All
All
right.
right.
All right.
That's all right.
You are all explaining the fact that I have a cold and I am not stopping this nonsense.
Yeah.
But I'm going to stop it anyway. So there.
No,
Yay.
it's
This
your
is the
fault for not being here yesterday. We've gone mad with power.
We have.
And by
Oh my
yesterday,
God.
you mean 2 days from now when the long run will come
Yeah.
out.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, you'll hear them out of order, but we did just record the long run yesterday.
People will be like, "What the fuck?"
And
You mean-
oh my god, you have so much puppet sodomy talk to look forward to.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's gonna be it's a real firecracker.
We
of a show.
topped ourselves. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah,
I
I like to
am
call it
so glad
episode
that I'm not
17,
on
part
that.
2.
You
It was
episode
17, right?
12 part
The
2.
That
puppeting.
one. That one. That's the one. That's what I meant.
That's
what I said.
That is. It's
Future me,
yeah.
edit that in to say the right thing. Thank you.
So to answer your question, Chard, yes, I did pitch The
Yeah.
Adventures of Superhero Girl. And I like this comic book a lot because I think that it says a lot of interesting things about superheroes that you really don't hear often coming from mainstream superhero publishers. And I think part of that is that it's written from an indie perspective. It's Canadian, which I
Yeah.
think is a big plus in its favor.
So much Tim Hortons.
So very Canadian.
So much Tim Hortons.
So many Hardys.
Can I get
It's-
some Timbits in this
It's a
bitch?
very strong female perspective, and I don't mean that in terms of She-Hulk as in strong,
Right.
But like, it's
or big. What
it's
is it?
not fueled from a masculine perspective. It's not muscles and strength and fighting and we're gonna beat the bad guys. Like, there is a lot of emphasis on character and personality and relationships, and it's a relatively simple comic for what it is, but I feel like it says a lot of interesting things about how we feel about superheroes.
I don't know that I totally agree with the idea that just because it's not about punching makes it a non-masculine point of view. Like, there are plenty of books written by men that aren't about punching and makes right. Like, there's a huge emphasis on the fact that, like, she's job hunting, she has relationship problems, she has, you know, the problems of a teenage or early 20s adult human being. And I don't know that those are necessarily, like, traits of a female writer. And necessarily someone who puts the emphasis on something that isn't, like, defeat the supervillain attempting to take over the world.
I would draw a line of delineation between male and female and masculine and feminine.
I think that's fair. I've actually been I read an article recently about somebody was talking about Brian K. Vaughan and his problems with writing women, and she makes the statement that Alana is very stereotypical, has a lot of stereotypically male traits, and then says, like, I'm not saying I want her to be stereotypically female, but I'd like her to sound more like a woman. And I had a problem with that because it's like, well, you're like, how do you mean that? Like, do you mean a woman that you want to read? Because that's a different thing than sounding like a woman. Like, what does a woman sound like? And how is that not making a statement about stereotypical women and stereotypical men? Like, masculine and feminine, I think, are different.
Also, women can be very masculine.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, I
think that's, I mean,
I would conjecture that men and women and those of us who are somewhere else or in between all contain both elements of masculinity and femininity within ourselves. I mean, those are basically just two poles on the spectrum of personalities.
Yeah.
Well,
Much like electrons are positive and negative in no sense other than those are the words that we use to describe.
It's also of note to say that a masculine trait is defined by humans. Like, nothing is inherently masculine.
Right.
Or
That's
feminine.
what I'm trying to
Decided
get
say-
at.
We've
Like,
decided to say that having feelings is a feminine trait, and that punching things hard is a masculine trait. But like that
Yes.
is in no way.
I agree.
Like, there's no fact to back that up,
aggression
right?
is
Like, it's
considered
just
a
thing.
masculine trait, but anybody can be aggressive.
Right, just
or
like
passive.
Pink was a masculine color up until the early 1900s, and now it's
I think a little bit later than
yeah,
that.
it's like
Yeah.
1920s, right? And then,
Yeah, 20s or 30s.
and then now it's considered like the most feminine of all colors. Like, it's just defined by the population. It really has nothing to do with anything. So I don't.
and that's why purple is my favorite color.
Purple's a great color. It's the color of Donatello.
It's
That's
an okay
the
color.
color of intelligence.
The color of kings and Donatello.
and
My favorite color
intelligence.
is green, which is the color of all the turtles.
That's fair. Except when they draw some of them with that like pukey off-green color.
Oh, the kind of brownish green.
What is that?
That's not good.
Baby
I don't know.
poop.
Baby poop.
Puce.
My
It's
point
called
being,
puce.
I think that although this is like very clearly influenced by a female writer, I don't necessarily think that because a female is writing something, it inherently will be like this, or vice versa. Like, because our industry is very male dominated, but it's also dominated by this preconception of what a superhero is. And so I would say that 80% of the mainstream Marvel and DC books have this very like predetermined idea of like, this is how these superheroes will act always, because this is how our genre has been written for the last 30, 40, 50 years. But there are plenty of writers in today's mainstream comics that are kind of turning that on its head. And I think that we're seeing a lot more of that now.
Yeah,
And
probably,
I think that a lot of that comes from indie comics like this.
Yeah, probably the closest analog I can think of to this in mainstream comics is probably Ms. Marvel right now.
Hawkeye is what I was thinking.
Also a good one.
Because it's just kind of the like day-to-day life of a superhero. Like, he has problems like with his neighbors and they can't pay rent, and he's not fighting supervillains that are trying to crush the planet with giant death rays. He's fighting like corrupt slumlords and very, down-to-earth problems that he has. Problems with his family, problems with girlfriends, problems with his new sidekick / partner.
Yeah.
It reminds me a lot of Hawkeye. I don't think it's as well written as Hawkeye, and I think that there's also the like serial webcomic nature of the book. I think is not something that I'm a huge fan of.
Well, I actually looked it up after I pitched it last week, and this originally was actually running as like a
newspaper
comic, weekly, I think, in a Canadian paper.
Okay, well, the serialized newspaper, like that comic style, where it's like, oh, you get one page, essentially, of this a week. And then, it continues. It leads to a storytelling style that is a lot different than what we're used to in monthly comics. And it means that the story feels more like tons of mini episodes and less like a big arc.
Yeah, it's definitely not the like tightly woven story or narrative that you would get in a comic book that you would buy in a comic
like
book
a monthly
store.
comic, yeah.
But it does have a story that advances and it grows organically, and I think it does a lot of really interesting things within the space that it does, that it occupies.
Yeah, it's just not my favorite style of storytelling. Like, I really like the long running arc where it's like an idea is introduced and it's followed up on immediately, rather than 6-10 pages down the line where it's like, oh, she ran into that boy that she liked again at the party, but she can't reveal her identity because, like, the way that the story's told, so much has happened in between those, even though it's been only like 10-20 pages. Like, I've totally forgotten how that arc was supposed to play out, you know?
Yeah, I guess I can see where you're coming from, but I've read so many things in so many different formats, a lot of them webcomics, that is really something that stopped bothering me.
Yeah,
I mean, there are so many things that I've read where it's like, oh yeah, this is only updating like once every 3 weeks. So something happened 5 pages ago, but that was 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Like, I've gotten used to that very kind of decompressed narrative where things are only happening a little bit at a time.
Yeah, and you're much more used to reading webcomics than I am. I almost never read webcomics. I read them when they're recommended on the show and they're published in a book form only, really.
Yeah, and that's totally fair.
Well, and I made the observation last week, like, you're a comic book retailer guy.
Well, it's how, I mean, I got into comics reading comic books monthly as a kid, and I never really stopped. I mean, I stopped buying them for a while, but that's still the mindset I approach it with.
But, like, you spend a lot more time in a comic book shop than Toby and I do.
Oh, yeah.
Toby and I spend a lot of time on the internet.
Right.
And so
and
a
the
lot
internet's
of times,
too scary for me, so I don't go there.
So a lot of times that is where we get our comic fix, is webcomics.
Yeah.
So, Cade, what did you think of this comic?
Oh, that's a loaded question, actually. This book to me had a lot of potential that I felt it didn't reach. Like, at the end of the 100 strips, I was like, okay, now the story can begin, and that was the end. To me, like, there were a lot of interesting characters introduced, and I felt that they didn't go anywhere. Like, I felt that these 100 strips were the perfect lead-up to starting some real stories and finding out more about these characters. Like Roommate Girl, I really wanted to learn more about. I thought that she was a pretty well-written character.
Oh, yeah.
I loved her conflict with the bear.
Yeah. When she's posing as superhero girl.
Yeah, in the park. But, like, I never got the feeling that, you know, it had started yet. Like, this all felt like lead up to the beginning of something, and then it ended, and I was like, oh, well, shit. Like, this is now over. And
Yeah.
I didn't feel that it began.
It's a lot like the beginning of Empowered, where it's like it takes a little while to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
And I felt that this was like the first trade of Empowered, where Empowered didn't really get strong for me until book 3. Like, I felt that this was great introduction to these characters. Now I want to see the characters.
Yeah, I definitely would have loved it if this had kept going and had done another 300 or 500 strips or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would have loved it's an interesting world. Like, I want to see more about a world where there are, like, superhero colleges and you can get a college grant or a government grant to be a superhero.
Yeah.
And just, you know, like, what are the villains doing in this world, and what, you know, I want to know more about some other villains, because we get introduced to a couple. Like, I really like King Ninja, but he retires from being a supervillain mid-story, and I like that. There's good moments in here, but I mean, having just read Invincible colors this a lot for me, because that's a very similar thing. Like, it starts really slow, it has to build a universe, but 110 issues later, we have this like huge universe of characters that they've created, and I feel like this could have easily become something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting in the same sort of deconstructionist way that Empowered is, and it feels very relaxed to me, and in being relaxed, it's kind of able to casually do things that other comics like spend a lot of effort doing. Like, she encounters her evil future self, and she has a bad day, and everybody's like, "Oh, she's a supervillain now." like she is dealing with a lot of the issues that mainstream traditional superheroes deal with, but in sort of a lighthearted way that lets you get that 100-foot view of it.
Well, it also is a lighthearted view because there's not a lot of panel space. Like, the resolution between her conflict with her future self is basically, like, has to be handled so quickly. So it's just punch her through a time warp into the future. Like, there's no resolution from that, really. There's just a conflict has arisen, and then we have to solve it by the end of this. There's not a lot of to be continueds, you know? Like, it feels a lot like an early newspaper comic, like early Calvin and Hobbes and stuff, where there weren't a bunch of the to be continued type panel stories.
You guys are making some very flattering comparisons.
Well, no, I'm comparing it to what I think are the best in, which is not fair. I'm making unflattering comparisons because I'm comparing it to what I consider the best. Like, the best serialized comic strip ever written, in my opinion, is Calvin and Hobbes, and the best superhero comic, in my opinion, ever written is Invincible. And I'm comparing it unfairly to both of those things, which had like 20-year run of Calvin and Hobbes and a 10-year run on Invincible. It's not very flattering, to be honest. Like,
Calvin and Hobbes didn't go 20 years.
Wait, didn't it start in it was like
it started in like 84, 82, something like
when
that,
did it
and
end?
ran through 94.
Oh, so just 10 years?
Yeah.
Like I thought it ran a lot longer than that.
Nope. It's just
When
that
did
good.
Really? I did not realize it stopped that early in the 90s.
It was like 94, 96, something like that.
Because, I mean, I kept reading it into the 2000s, just like getting the books and keep reading them. I just had never realized that that's when it stopped.
That does seem
It
early.
seems like it went for a lot longer. But, oh well.
So I know
but
that
yeah, those 10 years on both of those in this.
You were pretty negative on this, Joe.
So I read this over the span of 3 or 4 days. The reason I wasn't on last week's episode is because I have a medication issue, and just long story short, I have a thyroid issue, and if I don't take my thyroid meds, then I basically turn into a human slug. And thyroid regulates metabolism, so I can't think, and I get very cold, and I can't really do anything. So I was kind of sitting at home last Monday, drooling all over myself.
Under a lot of blankets.
And under a lot of blankets, yeah, absolutely. And so...
and for any of our listeners out there who would like to yell at Joe at viewfromthegutters.com,
tell
him to take his fucking medication.
I do. No, I got it taken care of. I'm on top of it. I went and got some things taken care of that I had been needing to, that I'd been putting off. So I'm good to go. I'm back
we're glad
in full force.
that you're back from the dead, is what I'm saying.
I'm glad I'm back from the dead as well.
Crawled out of the sewer with the cookie alligators.
Yeah. Yes, and it was not pleasant down there, and I missed you guys last week, and I wish I had been here. But I read this kind of over my convalescence period, if you will, and I didn't. It's not so much that I have. To me, this book this strip never gets started. It feels very much like Marmaduke or Dennis the Menace to me, where it's a series of, other than a few storylines, unconnected incidents. It feels, you can tell that it's during certain points that she's working on something else that seems to be taking up much more of her time. I never feel like, I understand that she's trying to make points. I think they've been made better. I think that everything feels very casual to me. And so I'm never able to kind of really get into the story. And every time something I'm like the King Ninja thing, I was like, okay, maybe this will be interesting. And then it's just done and it's over and she's moved on to the next thing. And I'm like, you're not spending any time on any of this. And I understand that that's partially due to the nature of where it was,
I think largely due to that.
She mentions it, up the first 50 strips, she has these little blurbs up under each strip kind of explaining what's going on.
This is on the website. It's
none
of that commentary is actually in the book.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's on the website, which is where I read it. And
where it's free, which everyone should
read
and
I mean, I encourage you to check it out, because, what the fuck do I know? But
I read it so fast that there's no excuse not to read this.
No, you could do it in a day. You could do it in a couple hours.
I did it in 20 minutes.
If you actually break down the
45
strip into, if it would be on a comic book page of, 3x3, so a 9-panel thing.
It'd be like a prestige.
It would be 33 pages.
Yeah.
Just about.
But her blurbs were actually much more interesting to me than the actual comic was, because she was talking about working on her other graphic novel, Friends with Boys.
Which is really, really good.
And which I'd like to read, because it feels like I don't... my problem with this book is not at all that I feel like she doesn't have talent. This entire strip feels like an afterthought to me. Pretty much every strip feels half-baked to me. And it feels like she just never... This was something she was remembering she had to do very close to the time it was due, and she sat down and she sketched it out. And she admits to that in some small capacity for a few strips, but I'm just never really able to take it and run with it. I think that the points she's trying to make are largely lost because of that, because I think that using the medium in this way to make a statement about the nature of some of the things that are wrong with it, or to give a different perspective, I think that really only works if you're able to really kind of get in and connect with a character or care about a character. And I just never was able to really care about anything that was going on in this.
And that shows that you have no fucking soul.
It says the guy that didn't like Hopeless Savages.
Oh.
Yes, exactly.
So-
I feel like this situation is very comparable to that, because I was never engaged with Hopeless Savages, never got to care about the characters, and just felt that they were terrible little cutouts.
But the thing is that I feel like Hopeless Savages, regardless of how you feel about the characters, told three very definite stories with three very definite storylines, and this told no stories. It told little blurbs in the, like, I mean, seriously, like, I thought about this because we kind of chatted a little bit after I finished it. I really think the worst thing you can say about a comic book is that it made you feel like didn't make you feel anything. Like, because even if you hated a fucking comic book, at least something about it was like polarizing enough to make you go, fuck this book.
It depends on why you read comics.
Then I agree.
I mean,
That's absolutely
if you
true.
read comics to go, I want this to move me and change me. It's like,
Yeah.
I think that you've gone into it with the wrong approach. This isn't philosophy. This
I
isn't
wanna
the
have
works
fun.
of Confucius. Like, this is entertainment.
Yeah, I
Did
want to
it
be
entertain you?
entertained.
Right,
then at the
and
end of the day-
I can
Were you
recognize
not entertained?
I can recognize the argument, like, I didn't get enough out of this. I wanted it to do more. I wanted there to be more of it. The story didn't have time to develop.
And I don't think that that's a terrible criticism. Like,
No,
we often
certainly
say that
not.
that's a good criticism of something, is that we wanted more of it.
But I have a hard time entertaining the argument that there's nothing to care about here. I actually picked up the series when it was like there were something like 20 strips up. And it was the strip, it's page 27 in the book, where she comes home after a shitty day and the cat that she saved is there.
Yeah.
And she adopts the cat, and just the look on her eyes, the way it's drawn, I was like, I'm fucking in love with this strip. I'm just going to keep reading it now.
Yeah, my
because-
reaction was like, wow, I've only seen that 1,000 times before. I mean, and that's kind of the thing. I was able to predict most of what was going on. I found it to be predictable. It was not none of the ideas in this strip were developed enough to warrant her actually like putting out the strip. That's just how I felt about it. Like, I finished the page 100 and like it doesn't even have an ending. And I understand that's because like other things were going on. But there's just, I mean,
I feel like it's possible for something to exist for its own sake.
Yeah.
Like,
I talk about that all the
absolutely
time
agree.
on the show.
this
when you
is
guys
like
are
this
mad
is
at
not
stuff.
a 3-course meal.
no, it's not.
This
It's
is-
not even an after dinner mint.
It's a snack. It's light, it's airy, it tastes good, and it's fun, and then you have it and then you're done with it and you move on to the next thing.
Well, if this was a snack, I felt like this was a rice cake. Like, seriously, there was nothing about it that I took away from it. It's like I said, in a world maybe where books like Empowered and other things like Empowered didn't exist, maybe this would have hit me a little harder. And if she had told even one like arc where something actually happens, maybe then I could have been like, oh, I see that. I see who Superhero Girl is as a character. But she's just like this kind
She
of
feels
person
very
that goes and
archetypal.
she is very archetypal, but not
Well,
in
she's
like
literally named Superhero
superhero girl.
Girl.
Yeah, I understand that, and she does a lot of very.
I don't know that that's to the benefit of the strip, though.
Yeah, I don't think it really is either. Like, we've seen all this shit before, and we've seen it done a lot better. So, like, how are you gonna make me connect with your character? Tell stories. Like, that's all I'm asking.
We'll create a character that is not so generic as to just be called,
And-
I am the type of character that I am.
And
Like,
that's
if-
kind of
like,
yeah.
for example, a game series about a guy called Hitman.
And,
I don't
yeah.
know. Maybe you could come up with
With
better
something like that.
I mean,
And,
like,
like-
it's better content. And I don't want to hate on this book because I found it enjoyable. I had a fun time with it. But for a book that is about the exact thing that I love in the universe of comics, I don't know that I've ever read a book that I felt less about. Because it's not that there's problems with the book. There aren't a lot of problems with the book. It's just that I love teenage and early adult superheroes because they have realistic problems that they need to come into conflict with, and I don't feel like the conflicts were enough to make me care. She has financial problems, and how does she get out of it?
Well, and I think that kind of
She
brings me
doesn't.
around.
Like the conflict has no resolution. Like, she has a evil future self come from the future. How does she get out of it? She punches it hard. How does she defeat the evil monster? She throws it in the sun. Like, these aren't resolutions that are satisfying to me.
Well,
only
they're not
because I've
serious
seen them.
resolutions because it's not a serious comic.
No, and that's the thing is, like, I had a fun time reading it. I thought the art was really great. I love the colors in the series. I'm sure we'll talk about that later. And there are parts of this that make me chuckle, but it reminds me of other stuff that I like better. And I don't know that that's to a detriment of the comic.
I don't think.
I would say just the opposite. It reminds me of things that I like a lot, which means I like this too.
I don't think that nostalgia works like that for
There
me.
were parts of it that I thought that I really liked. There were things addressed like gluing the face mask to,
It's funny.
yeah, like, and then there were other, like, quote unquote realistic things that superhero comics never mention, and I'm like, oh, that's
I
interesting.
disagree
hope
that they
that
never
there's-
mentioned
Yeah, I
anything.
disagree completely with that.
That's to say that, like, no one has ever thought of that idea before. And not to say that
No,
there
I'm
isn't...
not saying that there's not, but in most general, as a general statement about comics, usually that stuff is not mentioned.
And that's why we don't like mainstream comics that much. Like, this
No,
is a
that
great
is true.
argument against why we don't love Marvel and DC the way that we love indie books.
Yeah. And I think the thing is this. The biggest problem with this book, for me, in fact, I would say my only problem with it, because I have, like, I mean, I pretty much finished it and was like, okay, I probably won't ever go back to that again. Like, I probably
Well,
won't.
if more comes out, I'm
But
interested to see
The
it.
thing is this, I don't feel like she ever finds her fucking voice in this. Like,
I-
this is
yeah.
her, if she had had more time to develop it, if it had been her main project, if a lot, like, I mean, you can play the if game a lot here. And maybe that, like, I think that there's definitely room to develop what she wants to do to a point where there is a character there. Like, I look at this and I'm like, I understand what you're trying to do. And, like, in reading what you're talking about when you talk about the strip, I see that you're capable of doing it.
Yeah.
But you're doing other things now, and they're more important than this thing that you're doing. And so that's cool, man. Like, this is what you're doing.
Well,
to get
yeah,
your
I mean,
name out
she was
there.
doing this for fun.
And that's
Yeah.
that's like cool. Like, this does not. I really want to read Friends with Boys now that I've read this, because I think that's where her energy was going during this. But, like, this in and of itself, it just needed more of literally everything that was in there. I felt it needed more of. Like, she
Yeah,
needed
I felt
to
that
turn
this was
up.
a beginning that never went anywhere.
This is a 2. It needed to be an 8. And if it was an 8, then yeah, we're talking.
Well,
because
it's sad too, because my favorite DC characters are Supergirl and Batgirl, and they deal with a lot of the same problems that she's dealing with in that book. And I wish that they had been addressed more. But the reason that I love Supergirl and Batgirl is because they have depth and they have character and they're part of a legacy.
Well,
and like,
and-
things have come up.
Exactly. This
One of
had
the-
potential to be
Yeah.
that, and
And I mean, the fact that her brother's superhero name is Kevin and her superhero name is Superhero Girl, like, doesn't do a lot to endear me to the universe in a way that, like, the Tick, all the characters in that, every superhero in that makes me endear to that character, because characters like it's Batman in the show, but it was a deflator man.
Deflator Man.
And it's like, what? I just want to know more about that character. When you come up with a cool character name, like that does so much for me. Like Venture Brothers having like Crimodile and Captain Sunshine and King Gorilla, like all like just the name Tigerific, White Noise, like all of those are just like they just endear me to a character so much to come up with a clever name.
Thinking about the Venture Brothers cracks me up.
Well, it's in that Ben Edlund tradition of the Tick. It's in what made Empowered so endearing to me too, is because there's just like an equally ridiculous number of characters. Not like what's the
Maid Man?
It's
a great character.
I need that. I just needed a little bit more. And it's not that I didn't like this, because I read it and was like, that was fun. Like, is there more? And then there wasn't, and I was disappointed. I wasn't like, that's shit.
I guess
there
to
isn't
the end
ever
of
more.
hard strips, and I'm like, wait, that's the end?
I hope that she comes back to this world. I hope
so too.
I hope that there's more that she wants to develop with this character, and when she really cares to come back to it, that's when I want to read it. Because if she has enough ideas to go, I'm ready to write that again. Like, I'll be there. I'm ready to read it.
I guess I have a hard time coming around to the idea of, this is good, I liked it, it was fun, but it didn't do anything for me and I don't care about it.
Well, that's not what I'm saying at all.
Yeah, I'm saying that I didn't care about it. Let's be clear. That's not what I'm hearing from Chard or from Cade.
I'm not talking to Chard specifically.
There was
on
a lot of potential, and when it ended, that's not the end to me. That's
I mean, I guess I feel like saying it could be better is an obvious thing to say. Like, of course it could have been better. Everything could have been better.
I've said that. I've said that before many times on the show. Like, I agree. Like, just because something is really good doesn't mean there isn't room for improvement. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with pointing out the points in which it has room for improvement. That's kind of what we do on this show.
Yeah.
I think that
I guess what
come
it was
from a
for me
tradition of
is
reading a lot of characters like this.
I feel like there's a lot of negativity in this room right now.
Well, it's funny to be on the other side of that, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is what every episode is like with you, Toby. Hey, you didn't like a thing that has a lot of redeeming qualities.
This is me last week on Spider-Man. I was the only one that didn't like it.
Yeah.
Actually, I was actually listening to the episode at home, and I think at one point I messaged Toby, and I was like, you guys are right about Superior Spider-Man.
Man, fuck you guys.
But, I mean, yeah, and I think...
For me, there was a lot of good points about this book. There were a lot of things I really liked about this book, and I wanted to see more of them, and I felt that this book never got a chance to really come out and be the book. Yeah. I felt that it was a great lead-up to something.
I think we all agree on that.
And it never blossomed.
It needs more time to coalesce, I think. I think there's good ideas of a universe there, and I want more of it.
The thing is, though, is that I don't, like... I would read this. If she came back to doing this and was putting it up on a website and was doing it like that, I would only want to read it if it was a thing where I was, like... It needs a story. Like, that's the biggest problem for me, is that I don't feel there's a story going on here. I feel like there's a bunch of... Like, seriously, the comparison I made in the beginning, reading this was very similar to reading something like Marmaduke, where you get one blurb a week, and you're like, oh, that was a funny joke, Marmaduke, and then that's it. Yeah. Like... And because
no one has ever said that's a funny joke.
No,
Marmaduke.
I just thought of Marmaduke. Yeah, no, Marmaduke was just like the first one. That,
Marmaduke is a crime against humanity.
Marmaduke popped into my head because my sister dated a guy once who we called. Marmaduke? No, his name was. I'm not going to say his name, but my dad called him Marmaduke, which was hilarious
because he was boring. Is that why he called him that?
He was just kind of a tool bag. And,
every single Marmaduke strip can be summed up as, look at that dog. That dog is incredibly large.
That's Clifford.
How large could that dog possibly be?
That's Clifford.
No, that's Clifford.
You're that's
Clifford. That's Clifford, the big red dog. As opposed to
how
Marmaduke,
red could that big
who was
dog
just
be?
A silly, great. How big could that dog be? Exactly as big as it is. It's weird.
Well, or like something like Garfield, right? Like
very like something like Garfield, where
they make you chuckle a little bit.
There's no real, and that's fine if you're telling like Garfield stories, right? But like when you're telling a story where you want your audience to like connect with your character because you're making a statement about something, you need to put more meat on the bone. And like I felt like it's just the bone. Not in a dirty way, so
Yeah.
just stop, okay?
I wasn't going to say anything.
I was talking to our naughty listener.
I did want to kind of use this as a little bit of a jumping off point, and I'm not sure if it's just me saying a thing or if there's an actual conversation that needs to happen based on that. But I found this interesting in the way that I find a lot of webcomics interesting, because as an industry, the comic book community is talking a lot about a lot of the sexism and patriarchy that has been kind of bundled up in what we think of as comics.
Well, it's a boys' club.
It is.
Absolutely.
But that's only when we're talking about traditional print comics. When we actually turn and look at the web comics are incredibly democratic, but more so meritocratic. Mm-hmm. Anybody can make a website and throw a comic book up on there, and if it's good, it will become popular and people will read it, and you can be successful. And if it's not, you're not going to. And there's no gatekeeper saying you can or cannot do this particular story. And there are a lot of, especially female creators, that are flourishing in this web comic space that I don't think would have gotten attention in traditional print comics ever.
Absolutely.
I disagree only because when we say print comics, I would like to insert the phrase Marvel and DC, because traditional stapled indie comics like underground comics have never had those gatekeepers. They are very much meritocratic in the same way.
Well, they have, in the sense that you need to get a certain minimum order threshold.
I'm not talking about Diamond. I'm
like,
talking about
you need to get a publisher who says, yes, I foresee an audience for this comic, and I'm going to publish it.
We have that in Seattle. We have Fantagraphic Books. They put out tons of works by a lot of really fantastic female comic book creators. We have stuff like Alison Bechdel's Fun Home, and we have many web, or not web.
But there's also there's a price bar to entry in terms of, like, I have to get this thing printed.
Yeah, and I would say that merits something that, like, oh, this is good enough, we will publish it. Yeah,
but somebody has to decide that.
Yeah.
Where when you're talking about the internet,
the fans
people who
decide
get to decide that are the people who are looking at it, who are the fans.
I think, once again, I
like,
think both of you are right. It's half the argument. Webcomics allow an even playing field because it's not about money. It's not about getting it to a publisher. You put it up there, people like it or they don't.
It's a popularity contest.
And that's what comics are in general. Like
I think that they're not a popularity contest. I think that an editor is important.
I think an editor is
There's
important
a difference between an editor
no
and a
matter,
publisher.
I agree with that.
Those are two different people.
I agree with that. I think a lot of webcomics need an editor,
is
not
that
necessarily a publisher.
Anybody can put it on the website. Like, if you draw a picture and put some words under it, you can put it on the internet. Mm-hmm. People can judge it. If you want to put that into a book,
you can print it.
I mean, you could, but it would cost you money.
Yeah.
It's going to cost you a lot of money, and how are you going to get that into people's hands?
The same way that you get the webcomic into people's hands through the internet. Like, the publishing of books.
Well, then you're just publishing on the internet in a different way.
Yeah.
Well, that's still publishing through the internet.
The internet is a distribution source as well as a community. Like, the fact Amazon is not a community of people that buy things, but it puts the ability of people. It gives people the ability to buy stuff that wouldn't be able to buy those before. People from small towns can now buy specialty goods that they would not have been able to buy by living in a small town. That's what the internet provides as a distribution source. That's what I'm talking about.
I'm saying go back to before the internet and look at what the independent comic community looked like.
There was a time before the internet?
There was never a time before the internet.
Believe it or not, the internet at one point did not exist.
But I think that in that era, we had stapled comics. We had the 60s underground revolution of indie comics.
Right, and they were underground. They were so much smaller.
They were.
I guess here's the thing. A webcomic allows you to put up whatever you want. There is nobody to say...
Yeah, I don't disagree that there are no gatekeepers, but I don't know that is...
Like, okay...
They are both the merits of that system?
No, I'm saying
they are both judged by the fans, yes, but if nobody will publish your book, it's not out there. Whereas on a webcomic, it is out there.
Well, no, okay, let me put it to you this way. Brian Herbert, Dune, he sent that manuscript to every publisher there was, and nobody would publish it.
Yeah.
And eventually he got a friend to take that and throw it on the slush pile at a company that printed automotive manuals. And somebody saw it and was like, hey, that's pretty cool. We'll print that. It almost never got printed. And that is considered a classic of science fiction.
Yeah. Well, look at Harry Potter. How many people passed on Harry Potter before that got published?
I'm not sure. Probably a ton.
Well, it was a ton of publishers.
The idea
like
is
right,
that...
but how many hidden gems are there out that got passed over, that never got a chance to find the audience that would care about them, that can now have the opportunity to find that audience because of the internet?
It's varying degrees of the question, like, will it sell, right? Like, Marvel and DC are like, we're not putting out anything that we can't fucking sell, however many copies. And as you get further removed from that, I think that people like Fantagraphics and Kitchen Sink and Slave Labor and some of these smaller guys are going, their question is much more, is this something people should be reading? Like, do I see something in this that I think is worth putting out there?
They are curators of work that they believe in.
But then on the internet, it's the ultimate, like, I'm the creator of this and I think people should reading of it. So it's just varying degrees of, like, getting away from that, can we make money on this? And I think that, like,
it doesn't... Just because something is popular on the internet doesn't mean that it's reaching a wide majority. I mean, like, it's reaching a majority of people because it's popular, but that doesn't mean that it's reaching the masses. So, like, it's a argument of preaching to the choir. If you're creating quote unquote groundbreaking for mainstream books that are like, hey, we're going to treat a character with respect who's a female, and we're not going to put a bunch of sexist bullshit in here, and we're not going to tell her to get back in the kitchen all the time, and a lot of people read that and go, this is great, this is what society should be about, we're all reading this, tons of people are reading it, that doesn't necessarily mean it's permeating society.
It doesn't necessarily have to permeate society, it just has to permeate the comics subculture. And
which
I think
it
that these
already
creators
was doing in the comics subculture of underground comics.
Yeah, but you're talking about a vastly different scale.
I mean, potentially, like,
I guess
the
the potential
potentiality
scale,
of something on the internet of reaching a wider audience is there's a much greater potential of that than, like, people that were reading the Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers or Crumb's early stuff or even RVP Card stuff.
Well, a lot
back
of that
then,
we
because
don't
those
know.
guys were, like, mimeographing that shit and like passing it around at parties.
Yeah, we don't
stuff.
know how many people were reading that.
But we can venture that I guess that it wasn't as many people that were reading fucking Superman.
That, yes, but how many are there more people reading Earthworld than are reading Superman? Are there more people reading Homestuck? Is an anomaly.
I would venture a guess that there are more people who were reading Homestuck when it was updating regularly than bought Superman every month.
I agree, but it's an anomaly. It is not the rule.
No, it's not the rule. But there are a lot of webcomics out there that have 5-6-digit readership.
Yeah, and how many does
not
Superman
necessarily have
have
ever gotten a chance in a print environment.
Well, how much new
yes
time? I mean,
no.
I think it's a testing ground. I think it's more like that. It's
right, and what I'm saying is that
I
I find the webcomic space incredibly compelling because there is so much experimentation, and you can have things like The Adventures of Superhero Girl, where she was kind of doing it like in her extra time on a weekly basis. Like, it's not perfect, but she's getting it out there, and she does 100 strips and she's like, I have to move on to other things, but I did this thing and I'm going to make a deal with Dark Horse to print it in a book and you can buy it and it'll give me a little bit of money to finance my other projects.
Yeah.
I guess for me, the important thing about webcomics is even if people like it or not, that stuff is there. You can go find it. Whereas...
And I would say that that's always been the case.
But if they take it to a publisher and nobody will publish it, that is not the case.
They can still publish it themselves.
I mean,
so I'm publishing,
but it's not something I would be able to
thing.
find. If somebody in Chicago went and made a paper and pen, stapled it themselves, I'm not going to be able to find that. But
that's saying that word of mouth occult classics cannot exist, and that argument is not true at all.
No, I'm saying that if I publish something myself and I print 1,000 copies and I distribute it to 20 comic shops up and down the West Coast,
you don't even necessarily.
And somebody's
giving them the
in fucking Alabama, they're not necessarily going to know that.
But they're
even
not
exists.
necessarily not going to see it. Like, that's how cult
No,
classics
that's
become
true.
a thing. Like, that's
But
how old bands like that didn't tour the West Coast, their music still made it to the West Coast. People would hand,
Yeah, but
records.
again, you're talking about huge orders of magnitude of difference between what was possible before the internet and what's possible now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I
and
agree.
like,
But
I mean,
you're
you
saying
can't say that Homestuck is an anomaly and then say a cult classic isn't. Like, that's the point. Of the
No,
cult
I'm
classic,
saying
is
that
it's an anomaly.
you are, I think, giving the internet too much credit for something that already existed, in which there was a lot going on outside of Marvel and DC, and that has always been the case.
No,
And
that is
I
true.
feel
More
like
people are
I feel
seeing
like
it
I'm
now?
saying, isn't it incredible how fast we can travel today? And you going, well, there's always been horses.
I disagree that that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that the alternative has always been there.
The alternative has been there.
Maybe
it's
more
now
people are
easier.
seeing it.
I mean,
Maybe.
you're not going to find anybody that says that the internet did not dramatically fucking change user-created content in this on this planet.
It is now
you are now
easier
capable.
to
Like
find.
R. Crumb, at the height of his fucking
Mm-hmm.
popularity in the undergrounds, was maybe fucking capable of reaching the people in the neighboring states and people like the intellectual intelligentsia of that time that were in large cities.
Mm-hmm.
People in the middle of the fucking country, their chance of running into something like that was almost nil. Now, in the day of the internet,
Yeah.
he could fucking reach like worldwide audiences.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we
And
have
it's
people
not-
listening
it's
to us
not even-
around the world. If we were doing a fucking little ham radio show in our basement, we would have a much shorter reach. Like, the internet, I agree with you that
But
it
that's
was
not-
around before.
It's not only just the internet; it's also that data is a lot smaller now.
No,
Because if we
absolutely.
were recording this
But
20 years ago
it's-
onto eighth-inch tape, like we would need 4 tapes for every
Oh,
episode,
absolutely.
and those are $100 each. Like,
Absolutely.
just the cost of us producing what we do is a lot lower. Like, you don't have to print a page anymore.
No, you
And
don't
that's
have to mime
exactly
your
draw
my
it.
right shit
It's
point,
just
either.
is that the
digital.
webcomic thing, people can put it out there at no cost, and it will exist.
And
But I
and that's the point
yeah.
that I'm trying to make, is not how many people are you reaching necessarily, but how easy is it for you to put it out there in the first place and for people who are interested in it to find
You
it.
mean for you to physically make it?
Yes.
That it has nothing to do with the internet. That has everything to do with computers. You're drawing on a computer space, not
So
you're not
would you-
drawing the comic on the
Right,
internet.
but you're distributing it on the internet.
Yes, and as a distribution source, I agree with you that it is reaching a slightly larger audience. But at the same time, it's like how many people read webcomics versus how many people watch television or film. Like this,
I feel like you're you're comparing apples to oranges. I think it's a question of how many people are reading webcomics versus how many people are reading Marvel and DC.
we're talking about gatekeeping.
I,
And that the webcomic has created an environment in which there aren't gatekeepers for webcomics.
Right,
That
and
I
that
agree
allows
with.
for more non-traditional comics, story types, to be seen and appreciated.
Well, it also just allows for more comic books, period, to be seen and appreciated by everyone. Digital comics do that for everything. You can now download more copies of Invincible than have ever been printed. That's just what digital comics do.
no, I mean, I don't disagree with you, but I agree with what Toby's saying. Like, if I have an idea and I can draw it out, like, I can use the internet to reach an audience that I would otherwise not have access
As
to.
long as what you're doing is good.
No,
No,
absolutely.
not
I mean,
necessarily.
that's not.
When Jeff Jock started doing questionable content, he was not good. His art was terrible and like very
Like the
stick
stick
figure.
figure robot, yeah.
I mean, people.
And he got better as he went.
But why did people read it if it wasn't good?
No, well, and that's the thing. It's like
I don't know that
understand-
people did read it when it first came out.
But when it got
I mean,
good,
how long did
people
it take
read
him to
it.
find an
Yeah,
audience?
I mean,
And that's the
yeah,
thing, is
when
that
it
he had
got
the
good, people read
opportunity
it,
to
and
get
he makes
good.
a living off of it now.
Right? Like, it did not gain mass appeal until it was good.
No, but it
Things
existed
don't get
before it was
published
good.
until they are good.
But it existed before it was good, and it allowed him to get better because there was some readership at least.
As does writing in your basement every day for 10 years like George R. R. Martin did before anything he did got published. Like, he still had to hone his craft. Just because people didn't watch him hone his craft
Yes,
doesn't
but
mean that
the
he wasn't
fact that
doing
it
it.
existed, like, okay, he had it out there, and there were some people who came to it and said, okay, yeah, this is good. Maybe you should change this. He was getting criticism.
From publishers.
Constructive criticism.
From editors and publishers. George R. R. Martin.
No, and
Oh,
I'm
you're
talking about Jeff
questionable-
Jocks.
Okay.
People could see his stuff and say, yeah, this is good. You should keep at it. You should get better.
Mm-hmm.
His stuff existed. People saw it. It got better. Then it got popular.
I think
Yeah,
that
and-
you can really see this with the Disney movie Cars.
Kill yourself. Kill yourself.
It's
okay,
really
wait,
the
let-
best example
let-
of what we're talking about.
I want to try and frame it in one more way, and then I think we should move on. Imagine that you're a young woman who's really interested in comics, and you've tried drawing some stuff, and you see the unmitigated shit fest that, like, the traditional comics community is throwing in your face all the time, and you're like, I'm not going to ever try drawing my own comic because nobody's ever going to appreciate it or care about what I have to say. And I get laughed
or
at every
because
time I
it's
go
going
into
to
a
cost
comic
me money
shop.
to try to get it published.
But are
Right,
they,
like, what's the
like,
point in me doing that? Versus that person going, I'm going to draw my stuff and I'm going to put it online, and it's going to find an audience that's going to appreciate it that aren't people who are in comic book shops and who are laughing women out the door.
I agree that it is easier to get feedback on the internet based on what you're doing than it once was, but to want to draw a comic means that for some reason something about the medium interests you. And that usually means that you've been exposed to things that you like. And so the exposure of webcomics is not necessarily what I think is fueling people to become comic book artists more, is just that there is a huge artists community online. Like with stuff like Twart, like the tweeting art and deviant art. A lot of those people never go on to draw a comic book in their life, but they will create fan art that goes on T-shirts and make them money. Like they will become an artist for pay based on the fact
And
that
I
like
think
they
that's
have an
equally
artist
good.
community.
Can I ask that you never use the word twart again?
I think
Because
that's-
that sounds like
yeah.
something awful that
That's a
happens
real
to you,
thing.
like in church or during class. You're like,
Yeah.
oh,
I just
twarted.
twarted. No, it's twarting was a thing for like a long time. Like a lot of the guys that were the initial originators of twart, of tweeting art they would do it like every Friday. They would just like spam Twitter with their art. They're all now employed. They were not full-time artists at the time, and they are now. Like less than, well, I don't even know how long Twitter's been around, but I remember hearing about that in like 2008, and they're all employed as full-time artists now. So I think
was
that
further
the
back
internet,
than 2008 because Twitter was originally set up to use text messages. Like you would send your text message to Twitter and it would be posted to your account.
right?
And that was before smartphones were
Well, I
really a
think
big thing.
twarting I first heard about in 2008
Okay.
because it was at the time when it was like you can actually attach.
I twarted once when I was 11.
The point being, like, I do agree that it is easier to get stuff out there in the world. I disagree that it is that this is something that we don't see from comic books before. Like, I think that comic books have always had a welcome place for.
And I'm not saying that they aren't. I do agree with you.
And-
I just think that it's easier these days with the internet to get your stuff out there.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that I think it's great that there is this very separate web community for comic creators, like completely separate from what's going on at comic conventions and in comic shops.
But I see a lot of those guys at comic conventions and at comic book shops.
Yeah, the really popular ones.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the less popular people who are
I
just
like-
getting started out.
I liked it better when we were making Toby feel bad about his book. Can we go back to that?
No, No, we can't.
That window is closed forever.
I did want to talk about something. I'm trying to remember what it was. I got distracted.
I do want to point out, though, that there are a lot of people that do like this book, and it did get an Eisner nomination for Best Humor Publication.
Yeah.
So,
Which,
I mean,
there are great webcomic. They're actually, I think that this year they'll have to separate, or next year they'll have to separate webcomics from digital comics as a nominee.
Yeah,
Because-
well, I mean,
can't believe they
there
don't do
are
that already.
some already that do that, but
No,
some
the Eisner is the webcomic includes High Crimes this year, which is just a digital comic book.
Oh.
Like, it's in the same category as webcomics. So I think that it's great that the Eisners appreciate webcomics. I think that the webcomic community is awesome, but I also think that the underground comic movement of the 60s was awesome. I think that places like
absolutely.
Fantagraphics and people who are willing to publish stuff like Rutu Matan's Exit Wounds and stuff that we don't normally see in mainstream comics, just because you're blind to the fact that there are other comics outside of Marvel and DC doesn't mean they don't exist. And they have always existed, and they always will exist, because there will always be such a thing as counterculture. Yes, the internet makes counterculture more accessible, but it also makes dickhead assholes more accessible too, because
absolutely.
everyone has the same weight and everyone has the same anonymity. So you can go online and just send random death threats to everyone.
It's the
like, how is that a
great fuckwad theory?
How is that a greater community than what we had before? Like, how is that any better?
Well, I mean, the thing about it is it's not about a better or worse thing. It's about being able to. It's about, I mean, bringing people together. I don't. That sounds very fucking like long distance commercial thing, right? But it's like, yeah, right now, especially this whole like the way women are treated over expressing their opinion about offensive art in the comic book world is being met with some incredible violence by some very, very troubled individuals. And the thing is that, yes, those voices are loud, but there's also many, many communities that are coming out and going, we are standing with you.
Yeah,
like, we're not going to put up. And like,
the internet is the reason why this is a topic of conversation right now.
Yeah, because you can't
because without those
mainstream
communities,
media has failed to report on anything of any relevance in the last 20 to 30 years. Yeah, you're right. Mainstream media sucks a fat dick.
Yeah,
and we should be talking about all this shit all the time. Like, gender politics should be something that occurs on the nightly news every single goddamn day, because it's an important subject. And the fact that it gets swept under the rug, I'm glad that the internet exists to expose stuff like that. Like, I do agree that that's good, but it also exposes the fact that most people in the world are giant assholes.
I don't think it's most. I think it's the loudest.
I think it's the most.
You know, Chard, most people in the world don't speak English and have never read a comic book in English.
That's true.
Could not care less about any of the things that we're talking about.
I've been on a lot of message boards in Hindi and Chinese, and those no, I don't want to insult our Chinese and Hindi.
He's like,
when was the last time that you read a Chinese comic book?
They don't allow comic books in China. If you post something on the internet, they chop your hands off.
Chop your
rich
fucking
tradition
hands
of Chinese comic
No, I know.
books.
I'm sure we just offended somebody.
I'm sure I've offended all of China, but I don't want to lose the technology terrorism war to China, because their government scares me.
That's fair.
That's all. In the future, I would hope that we don't lose that war that we're inevitably going to lose. The future is bright.
That's so bright. It's so bright.
The world is a shitty place.
Believe me, if that happens, it's going to be an own goal.
It's going to be an own... Yeah, of course. The Chinese government, or whoever is attacking the U.S., I don't know who it is, but like attacks the Pentagon with 7 to a ton of times every day digitally.
I'm sure that they do, but I mean, the FCC just put out this prospective ruling or whatever, proposed rules that would just totally eviscerate net neutrality. We don't need the Chinese to fuck up our digital telecommunications system. We're just going to do that to ourselves.
I'm sure that we are going to do that. It's more of the censorship, because China has massive problems with censorship.
Yeah, it's actually.
I mean, YouTube is banned in most of the states.
Like China, if their young girls are being arrested for writing erotic fan fiction in China, jailed. 15-year-old girls are being jailed for that, because it is it's inviting an offensive ideas into the minds of their children. If that's not the most fucked up thing,
that is incredibly fucked up.
That's awful. That's absolutely terrible. I don't want to lose that war to a government that's going to arrest 15-year-old girls for fan fiction.
I mean, I have nothing to say about that, because this is not a conversation I want to have on the fucking podcast.
Sure.
Because we're not the McNeil Air News Hour.
That's fine.
Chinese assassins are going to come and kill us now.
Bring it on.
They can try.
You know what?
They've been trying to kill me for years.
I can't wait to get death threats.
I was the man in Tiananmen Square. I really wasn't.
I
Contact
agree.
reviewfromthegutters.com.
Yeah, I agree that the internet is doing some excellent things for what would have been countercultural ideas, and that now are much more mainstream. And I feel like we are definitely making forward strides as far as the gay community getting a lot more respect that it needs to get, women in culture getting a lot more respect, people of color getting a lot more exposure. I think that there's definitely a lot of good to be had there, just on the fact that people now have a voice and a place to voice their opinions.
That's all I wanted.
I think that there are still a major amount of gatekeepers on the internet that are just basically the average population doesn't want to hear what you have to say. And although you're not being gatekept by a publication or a publisher or an editor, you're still being told that your opinion doesn't matter by someone and that your work is not good by someone. I don't think gatekeepers disappear
those people's voices have no more weight than anyone else.
Yes, they do, because they just don't read your stuff. Like, they have an equal weight because you have to succeed to make money.
Yeah, but you don't need 50% of the people on Earth to read something that you did in order for it to be considered successful.
That's true.
It doesn't matter if 100 million people don't listen to our show.
Right.
Because the people who do listen to our show listen to it and appreciate it.
Well, I agree that Diamond's number of, like, you need the large ordership is true, but, like, when you look at stuff like Harry Potter, it's like it wasn't 50% of publishers that said they would publish it. It was out of 16 publishers, it was 1. Like, that's the same thing. Like, you just have to shop your ideas around more. Like, because your book didn't get published the first time is not enough to give up and say, I'm done with this, fuck that. That's what the lesson you learn here is.
I think the lesson you learn is you shop it around, nobody wants it, you put it up on the internet, you gain a following, and then you can go back around and go, hey, listen, you publish this thing, it comes with a built-in fucking following.
I agree, that's great. But I also think that there was a way for you to get your work published before, too. It took more legwork, maybe that's true, but maybe that's not such a bad thing.
I think the thing is this. You're not going to get anything published through sheer force of will, and we know that because there are more fucking out-of-work writers in this country than there are writers in this country.
There are also more books published this year than there were last year, and that has been the case since the beginning of time.
How many were, like, written by the same people?
It doesn't matter. There's more now than there was before. That means there's more chances of you getting published this year than there was last year. Don't give up.
Not if it was the same
print fiction
author.
Industry is even fucking sicker than the print comics industry. Yeah. Like, that is not a good example because they're just printing this like 800-page pot boilers by like the same couple of dozen people over and over again. But like, you go into a bookshop and you look at the new bookshelf, like especially the genre fiction, it's like, book 3 of a 17-part series, 950 pages. Like, it's a hugely monocultural place right now, and interesting experimental stuff is not being published by Random House or Penguin or Ace Books or whoever the fuck it is these days.
It never will be. It's the same as like the best.
That's not true. There used to be a huge mid-list where authors who weren't going to sell 1 million copies of their book were those people could still get published even when they're only selling 20 or 30,000.
But they were getting published by smaller companies, which has always been the case. Like the film industry
but those
works
companies
the
don't
same
exist
way.
anymore.
Well, because
like
people
they've
don't
moved
read
online. It's moved on to like print on demand and
Right.
people self-publishing.
Right, because people don't read print books anymore.
That's not true.
Like, digital books will replace print books.
Yes.
That is a fact.
They will eventually, but like you just said, there are more books being published this year than there were last year.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're not getting the newer writers that way, though.
I think that it just means you're not looking hard enough. I think that there's always going to be...
I think the thing is this, right? I think at this point we're talking in circles.
I agree.
All right? The fact of the matter is that you can espouse that, but that's not my experience. That's not Toby's experience, and that's not people that I talk to's experience.
You don't think that guys like Chuck Palahniuk, like that doesn't change things when new guys come out of nowhere and write something that has a massive amount of appeal, but he never wrote a book before that?
No, I mean I agree with you.
You don't think that changes anything?
Changes things,
but those
I
have
also
a gatekeeper. There are people saying,
somebody said this is good enough, I will publish it.
Yeah, but that's the anomaly, not the rule.
That's the exception that proves the rule.
Well,
that's not how you say it. That's
a
misnomer.
He was given
not how that saying works.
Like, he was given fuck off money. He was given a publishing contract that was like, here, we're not going to pay you shit. And he was like, all right, that's fine. And he wrote it and wrote an amazing book because he wasn't, like, he wrote a thing. And although it is the exception to the rule, that's exactly what webcomics are. They're the exception to mainstream comics.
Hold on.
Yes,
I have
they
a
are.
response. I have a response to Toby about the misnomer. We had a fucking 15-minute conversation about how literally means figuratively. So you can take your misnomer and you can shove it right up your ass. all
Literally,
right?
does
Literally.
not mean figuratively.
Because now, fucking, it is on. Okay.
Can I literally shove it up my ass?
Yes.
Irregardless of how you feel about it, you can shove it up your ass.
Fair enough. Is there anything else that we wanted to say about the adventures of Superhero Girl?
I just want to say that I love you guys.
I
we love
hate
you
all
too,
of you.
Joe. I just
As
wanted to
usual.
say that I hope she comes back to this. I have
Yes.
a lot of faith in Faith Erin Hicks. That
Yeah.
sounded
Faith
kind of
Erin
weird.
Hicks.
You've got faith in faith.
Exactly.
Faith squared.
I think that she is talented. This was good. I liked a lot of parts of this. I wanted more. The only bad thing I have to say about it is just that I don't feel that it went anywhere. I was waiting for it to start because this was an amazing beginning to something. And I hope she comes back to it.
Yeah, I like the art a lot in this. We didn't talk about it very much in this.
Yeah,
but
the
I
art
think
is
the art's
absolutely beautiful.
really fantastic, and it makes me
Especially
want
with
to
the
read.
color.
Yeah, the color's awesome. If you guys read it online, I would recommend at least going and looking through the hardcover for the colors because the colors are beautiful. And
It's short enough you can just go to the comic book shop and flip through it real quick.
Oh, definitely. And I would want to go read other stuff by her. I think that she's talented.
Yeah,
so.
check out Friends with Boys.
Yeah,
I would like to check out Friends with Boys.
I just want to check out boys.
With friends?
Nope. By myself.
By yourself?
In the creepiest way possible.
I was, oh, God, I was hoping we could do it together.
Nope.
Damn it.
That's a thing that I do by myself.
That's cool.
Eerily in the dark while it's raining with binoculars.
Oh,
Do you have
Okay.
things that randomly squeak around you while you're doing
Oh,
it, like
definitely.
floorboards?
Do we want to move on to
Creaking
recommendations?
branches.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, Joe, what do you want to read this week?
I am actually going to recommend something that I've been told to read by our very own Eric Mannix, and also from Out of the Fridge.
Ooh.
Mind Management, which I actually just started right before I came here. I wanted to read a few issues.
It's MGMT Mind Management by Matt.
Yeah, it's Mind MGMT, and it
Yeah.
said Mind Management, and I've read up to. Oh, I'll put it this way: I started reading it before I went and got Toby to come here, and while we were setting up, I said very little because I was totally engrossed in the third issue of it. It looks incredible. The story so far, I'm engrossed by it. I'm not exactly sure how much we should read. I have the first 18, and so I'm thinking
The first hardcover
is the first 6, I think.
Oh,
Well, the
it's-
first
it's-
arc is the first 6.
It's fat. There's a big
So-
fat hardcover that I think is like 12 issues or something.
I can
Tell
look,
us a little bit about what the comic's actually
So-
about, and I will look up how many issues are in the thing.
basically what the story seems to be, because I started with the 0 issue, is that there is an organization, a very incredibly covert, top secret organization called
Clandestine.
Clandestine. Yeah, that's a good one.
I like that word.
Organization called Mind Management. And basically the main story opens with 120 people on a plane that just kind of wake up being on the plane. They can't remember who they are. They can't remember how they got on the plane. They remember nothing of their lives before waking up on the plane, including the pilots. And
Also, there's a polar bear.
also there's a polar bear.
There's not a polar
and an island. And no, it's not that. It's much better. And then basically this reporter who's written a book on like a true crime book. It talks a little bit about in the 0 issue. And it was a bestseller, and it's been a couple years. She spent all her money. She's like broke, and she was kind of affected in some way by this as well. I think she was on the plane. I'm not exactly sure, but she basically she's watching the anniversary special, and she calls her editor, and she's like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to track down who it was. And she kind of starts to do that, and like right in the middle of doing that, her editor calls her and says, something's happened in Mexico, you got to go. And so it's her kind of chasing this one particular individual, because when the plane lands, it's found out that even though there were 120 people on the plane, there was 121 people on the passenger manifest. So she's looking for this 121st passenger.
So apparently 2 hardcovers have been printed, each one containing 6 issues. But the first volume is 200 pages. So I guess they're thicker than a standard 22-page comic.
Well, there might be back matter and stuff too. Like, one of the cool things about this is on the inside and back cover is like a little blurb about somebody from Mind Management. And then the last couple pages is like a character bio and like really cool ideas. Like, one of them was an ad management guy, right? And he could basically write subliminal ads. And they use this to kind of contact their agents because only agents can read them. Everybody else just sees like a perfume ad or a cereal ad or something.
That's
and
cool.
It's, yeah, right? It's that kind of like really cool, like...
Yeah, Matt Kint's really good. I liked Revolver, which was the first one that I read from him, which had kind of like a parallel dream, alternate reality.
Apparently volume 3 is set to come out on June 3rd.
Oh,
cool.
so we should read the first 18. That's 3 arcs.
First, okay.
Sure.
That's what
That's not out yet, though.
Well, that's
if
the
it comes-
collection.
That's the
Okay,
collection.
yeah.
So
Okay.
the 18 is definitely out.
Okay. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Oh,
art
yeah, his
because
art is
it's all
stunning. It's watercolor.
watercolored, Yeah.
And the page layouts are cool too because it looks like a page, like going to the printer. It's still got the blue marks on it and stuff. The whole feel of the book feels very cool. And the ideas are kind of blowing my mind a little bit, which I think for me, you know, I'm kind of, as you can tell from our discussion, right? Like, I can be cynical at times and I try not to be, but this I liked almost immediately.
Nice.
And I think it's really unlike a lot of the other stuff I've read. So I think we'd have an awesome conversation about it.
Cool.
Awesome.
Cade, what would you like to read this week?
Okay, so I'm still going through the list of recommendations that I got in my email from Brian from Facebook. And the one that I read this week was Ed Brubaker's Catwoman. It's 4 trades, issues 1 through 24. This is the new series after she supposedly was killed by Deathstroke in the late 90s.
Oh, yeah.
This starts 6 months after that. She's been in therapy, decides to put back on the suit. She gets her new suit, which is all black leather with the bubble
goggles,
eyes.
The modern suit that she's, I think, still wearing in the new
basically
52?
wearing a similar version of it in the new 52.
Okay.
It's a lot lower cut and more assy in the new 52.
Well, doesn't it have a zipper?
Yeah. Well, it's a lot lower zipped now.
Okay.
Well, Darwin Cook does the art.
Yeah,
this
and it's
line,
like
and
it's
awesome.
It looks more like a actual like tactical cat suit when he draws it.
Yeah.
Like it's not
Well, because he's
skin-tight,
incredibly
assy.
talented.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the art is Darwin Cook with inks by Michael Red. And she, like, the first arc is kind of a detective story. She's figuring out what's going on in Gotham, playing the superhero. And then in the later arcs, she teams up with Slam Bradley, who is Detective Comics #1. He's older than both Superman and Batman. So I thought that was pretty cool. And yeah, I guess.
It's great, like early 2000s Batman universe stuff.
Yes.
Like this is really cool. I was a big fan of this when it was coming out for sure. They've been reprinting them recently, which is really nice.
Okay,
yeah.
well, there's his run is actually a lot longer than this, but I think there were only 4 trades of this series.
His run goes into I think the 60s, issue 60-ish, and then I think Will Pfeiffer takes over, and it's still really good.
Okay, well, the 4 trades is
I don't
1 through
remember
24, so
exactly
that's what I'm
when he
pitching that
leaves
we
off.
read.
24 issues is a good number.
Yeah.
All right,
All right.
Toby, what do you got?
I also brought something of an older comic. This is something that I picked up for the first time in college, and I actually haven't read it again in a while, but it's something that was important to comics, especially indie comics, in the 90s. And it's Johnny the Homicidal Maniac.
Was this a pre-internet comic,
This
pre-web
is a
comic.
this is a pre-web comic,
Okay.
independent comic.
Oh, I see.
It's by Jonan Vasquez, who created Invader Zim. If you're familiar with
Yeah.
that program,
How many people read this comic, Toby?
A lot.
I'm just
all
kidding.
the people,
All the wrong people. No, I'm just kidding.
terrible
Whoa.
people,
Terrible.
Whoa,
loathsome,
guys.
loathsome
Sorry,
human
I'm
beings
sorry,
who
no.
have no
Whoa.
souls.
I
The
apologize.
judgment.
The joke.
These are the gatekeepers.
Goths,
You-
Goths
you-
read this comic
you
book,
guys-
and they learned nothing from it.
You guys are the gatekeepers.
So this,
I am Gozar.
Who
Go ahead.
gatekeeps?
I was
the
really
gate-
trepidatious about.
only Gozer. No,
Excuse me.
it's only
I was really
Zool.
trepidatious about pitching this book because it kind of shows its age. It's kind of rough. It's incredibly fucking violent and bloody.
It's about a homicidal
It's
maniac.
it's about a homicide, like a serial killer,
What's his name? It's Johnny.
Johnny. Although he
He's-
calls himself
he's-
Nee.
He's disturbed.
He is an incredibly
And the book
disturbed
is
individual who violently murders people in order to stop his wall from drying out because he paints it with their blood. And also he kills other people who just offend him, of which there are a lot. In fact, I think you could sum up this book very easily as hell is other people. But I think it was really interesting, really influential on indie comics in the 90s in much the same way that Scud the Disposable Assassin was.
Yep.
I think a lot of things since this have been inspired or informed by it, and it's a good thing to read in the canon of independent comics.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. It's reading this hurts my head. I enjoyed it when I read it first, but it's also not something that it's difficult to read because
It is.
very, very dark, and it's very twisted, and it's very disturbing at times. Not so much the violence for me, but like Johnny spends a lot of time in his head, and his head is a very awful, awful place.
There are awful things inside his head.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of weird, and there's monsters in
and
this
if
book,
is
and kind
the,
of crazy existential things happening.
If this is the director's cut too, it also has
The copy I have is the director's cut.
yeah,
yes.
which means it contains either a complete issue or part of an issue that was not released in the original run that had some pretty religious overtones.
It says it reprints material from Johnny the Homicidal Maniac numbers 1 through 7, as well as in Carpe Noctem magazine. Other
Yeah.
material was seen in the Holozines on the planet Mars, but you wouldn't know about that.
Well, it's holozines.
Zines.
They're like
No, they're like
magazines.
magazines.
They're zines.
They're Zines.
Okay.
Trust
Like-
me on this one.
This book was very popular at the comic shop in Utah.
It's very
Yeah,
popular
it was-
at many comic books.
It's
It was
very-
hugely popular at the time that it was coming out in the mid 90s.
Last year at Emerald
I
City.
mean, this was popular in like 2004, 2005.
we may have talked
Yeah.
about this on the Emerald City episode last year, but last year at Emerald City,
That poor man.
in the fucking special guest section, you had Andrew Hussey in a line full of Homestucks, and sitting next to him was, in the next booth area, was Jonan Vasquez. And it was just like, I felt very bad for both of them, because both of them have fan bases that,
Are insane.
yeah. And it was
Yeah.
funny because then that same year I went and saw Richard Horvitz and Ricky, I can't remember his name, but they did Zim and Gurr. And people were approaching.
Or not Gur. It was.
No, it was Gurr.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People were approaching him and like referring to him as Zim. And Richard Horvitz is a fucking pro because the way he dealt with that was to talk to them like Zim. So basically it'd be like, shut up and sit down. Like, I don't have time for this. But he did it as Zim. So it was
Right.
like totally what they wanted anyways.
Yeah.
But,
Perhaps the way that I would describe it to somebody who's never read it is imagine those moments in Transmetropolitan where Warren Ellis is most depressed about humanity and Spider Jerusalem is at his most like shouty and violent,
and
then just like dial it up and just never stop dialing it up.
well, give that cocaine and then PCP and then mix the PCP and cocaine together and ground it into its eye. And that's a
and then
good
put it
example.
in black stretch pants and cover it in onks.
and combat boots.
So I've never read this book. And the reason being that the fans of this book
Drive you crazy.
No, they just I see the people that read this book, and I was like, I don't think that that's going to be for me.
I
Much
was
in the way-
introduced to this book by my RA my first year at Evergreen, who was a bisexual polyamorous goth. I don't mean that as a slight. She was a wonderful woman.
Well, and I don't.
But she had very particular proclivities.
I don't mean that it's like, oh, the fans of this are terrible, and I don't
No,
want to read
no,
it because of
they're-
it. It's they like a specific thing, and I'm pretty sure that we don't have the same taste.
They are of a
I
type.
feel like I'm
They
saying
are.
the same thing.
Yeah, and
And-
so Cade, you worked in a shop in the early 2000s. I worked at a shop in the late 2000s. I think I started in like 2008 working in a comic book store. People still asked about this.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it was out of print for a while, and
Yep.
so daily I would answer, "No, we're sold out of that right now. I don't know when it's coming back into print." At least like 5 to 10 times a day. So
there's a
I
lot
think the
about it I like.
popularity of this has never really gone away.
No,
Yeah.
it's still very much. I mean, you want to talk about cult classic, Johnny the Homicidal
Yeah.
Maniac.
Yeah, it's something that you love not for its polish, because it's really not polished, but for its energy,
Absolutely.
of which it has a massive amount.
Cool.
And really, when you clear away some of the clutter, it's easy to see what Jonan is is yelling about in this. Like, I think it's something that most people can relate to. I think it's
Hating
definitely
other
an
people?
example, huh?
Hating other people?
Well, no,
It's definitely something
but
I can
the
relate to.
specific reason, because I mean, I think we can all relate to hating other people, but the specific reasons behind it, and just like he definitely hits. I think he strikes several good points in this. So
It's definitely something that I'm glad that I have on my bookshelf, but I also haven't read it in probably 10 years.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't
For a
own
reason.
this one, but I do own Squee, which was the other one.
Never read Squee or Lenore.
Squee. Well, Lenore is Roman Dirge.
Is it? I thought
Yeah.
that was okay.
Yeah, it's
Squee is Jonan, and I've read Squee, and it's more of the very similar stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If Johnny is rage, then Squee is like fear and anxiety.
I don't think I should ever read that.
It's tough.
So,
But-
Chard, what did you bring?
I have recently been reading a book at Marvel, and as I'm reading everything that's coming out everywhere, really, but it contains some characters that I love in the Marvel Universe, and I was like, you know what? I should go back and read where these characters originated from. So I am going to recommend that we read Brian K. Vaughan's Runaways. And Runaways was part of this line at Marvel that was aimed at more young adult readers, like in their teens, and so it was presented in a manga style format, and they were characters of that age that had basically discovered that their parents were supervillains, straight up villains, and they decided to run away from home because they did not want to be part of this villainous underground. And so these kids aged anywhere from, I don't remember what the youngest one, she's like 9.
Molly
Molly's
is like 8.
yeah,
And the oldest is 16 or 17.
17, yeah. So a lot of teens and tweens, is that a word?
Something like that.
These kids, they run away from home, and they're kind of finding their place in the Marvel Universe. And there are Marvel characters that show up, like Captain America and Wolverine at some point, but for the most part, at the beginning, it was super isolated.
Well, it's set in L.A.,
Right.
and they are quick to comment, like, there are no superheroes in L.A. in the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, ever since
Avengers
the West
West
Coast
Coast
Avengers
forever.
shut down,
Yeah.
Avengers West Coast forever.
they closed the doors, so...
And there's actually a reason that's given for that.
Not
Yeah.
in my heart.
Yeah, so I think that this carves out a really awesome place in the Marvel Universe, and I think it set the stage for stuff that would happen later in the Marvel Universe of, like, we can make room in the Marvel Universe for more characters, for young characters, and these characters would go on to be in stuff like Avengers Academy and Avengers Arena and Avengers Underground and all kinds of...
Avengers Daycare.
Avengers Daycare,
Well,
Avengers
they're-
Babysitter's
High
Club.
School.
They did like 3 volumes of Runaways.
Yeah.
There are a bunch of issues.
Yeah, total like in the 40s or 50s of issues, which
Yeah.
is a goodly number, and it was written by Joss
At
Whedon
least
at one point.
60.
Is it?
Yeah, because Volume 1 is 18, Volume 2 is 30, and Volume 3 has at least 20.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, the first volume was written by Brian K. Vaughan. The second volume was also written by Brian K. Vaughan with the exception of the final arc, which was Joss Whedon.
Yeah, that 6-issue arc.
And then it came back with a different creative team.
Catherine Immerman, I think, is the one who wrote Volume 3. I could be wrong. You can look it up. But I propose we read the first 18, that first arc, which I think is the first hardcover.
I
Yes,
believe
it
you're
is.
right about
Yeah.
that.
So Volume 1 through 18 of Runaways. And I don't remember if that has a subtitle on the hardcover to make it easier to find, because I know the later ones would do that. But
I'm sure you can figure it out.
if you love teenage heroes like I love teenage heroes, this is a great book. And I also love supervillains and just the communities of villains and heroes in universes. And so I love the fact that there are all these supervillains that you've never heard of, but they totally fit into the Marvel Universe in a believable way that it's like, yeah, these guys could totally be flying under the radar of guys like the Avengers and the X-Men because they don't have time to deal with shit like that. So,
And Molly Hayes is adorable.
yes, and there are mutant characters in this, and there are like technology-based heroes in this.
Yeah, there's
and
like all kinds of different
Yeah.
mutants and aliens and robots and
Robots.
psychics and magic.
cyborgs join the team at some point. So all kinds of cool, awesome shit. Oh yeah, the magic is great. Was it Nico?
Yeah, Nico has
She's
the
one of my
staff
favorite
of
characters.
one,
Yeah.
which is a very interesting plot device.
Yes, and I like. Yeah, it's so cool.
But
And I
let's
guess I
not
shouldn't
spoil
give
it
it
too
away.
much.
I was gonna give it away. No spoilers. All right. But yeah, I think everybody should read that. The art's really great. It's a really cool book, and it was cool, kind of teen book
All
from
right,
Marvel.
cool.
Joe, what do you want to read?
Can I go last?
Yeah.
Not
Are you gonna-
out of any kind of desire to do like a power play thing or
Are
anything.
you gonna
but
break the
simply-
tie?
Yeah, I'll break the tie.
Okay. Cade, what do you want to read?
Fuck, I don't know.
I'll
You
go first.
Cannot all go last.
I will go first.
Okay.
I will vote for Mind Management.
Cool.
I will as well.
Awesome.
Charmander?
Oh yeah. That's a tough choice because I really enjoy Catwoman.
It doesn't matter though. You can't vote for anything.
He still has to vote.
I still get to
Those
vote.
are rules.
Yeah, no, I
He
know.
does.
I mean, I have been reading Mind Management in an attempt to get caught up on it, so I can talk about it on top of the stack. But I'm already reading it, so I'm gonna vote for Catwoman.
Okay. Then I will vote for Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, which is hilarious because when Toby was like talking about it, I was giving him a look and he's like, "You're looking at me kind of off center and slanty eyed, so I'm just gonna put this down over here." And
And then I pitched it anyway.
then
Yeah.
he did. And you know,
That's okay. I honestly more just wanted to put it in people's heads as something that they might want to check out than something that we necessarily have to
absolutely.
talk about on
Yeah.
the
yeah.
show.
And I mean, it's more for me, it's less that I don't want to read this book and more that I think it's difficult to read this book the way I normally read books, which is just to sit down and devour them whole.
Well,
It's
there's
a
a
lot to
reason
take
why
in.
I've been avoiding pitching this book for a
Yeah.
year and a half.
And I think that's fair. Like I have it on my own bookshelf and I've been looking at it and going, not this week. So,
Yeah.
but I definitely agree that it's important.
So for next week,
Mind
Mind
Management.
Management numbers
Excellent.
1 through 18.
Yeah, I think that's good. And maybe we can entice Mannix. To,
And if you're
Oh,
picking
yeah,
it
you wanna
up,
be on that.
you can get the first 12 issues in 2 hardcover volumes. The third volume will be out in the beginning of June, so
Yeah.
a little over a month.
and that's Dark Horse.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
So check it out and join us back here next week. Same.
Also, in 3 days, the long run comes out. So if you have
In
not
2 days.
2 days, Friday or
days.
Saturday.
Today's Wednesday.
Yeah.
2 days is Friday.
Yeah. Are we releasing on Friday or Saturday?
I think we're releasing it on Friday.
So if you haven't read,
I was thinking.
If it comes out
Saturday.
on Saturday, I'll post date the post so it says that it came out on Friday.
Okay. So you have a couple days to finish reading Invincible,
Invincible,
is my
you need
point.
to
So
get
definitely
on
catch
it.
up. That episode went
and
Okay.
we read up through 110, so we do talk about 110.
for like 4 seconds.
Yeah, but enough to spoil what's going on.
Yeah, we
So
definitely do. So get
read
caught up on
110. Not that you could avoid spoilers on the web, anyways.
That's
but
true. Well, that's
do
why
it,
Some
read
of us
it.
don't go on the internet. It's because it's a terrible place.
It's like a warm, bloody.
Some
gut
people have
me-
a service that records these episodes to cassette tapes and then has it mailed to their shack up in the mountains.
We have a couple
true.
of fans that
That's- we
request
do.
it like that.
We
so
do.
I've got a digital. I'm converting everything to tape for them. So
But yeah, read Invincible and feel it settle over you like a warm blanket made out of guts and blood and viscera.
And awesome.
And awesome. Because that's the only thing a blanket like that could be, is awesome.
And warm.
And
All right.
warm.
All right.
We'll catch you guys next time.
Bye,
on The Long
everybody.
Run, and then on our next episode. Bye.
Love you guys.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Me From the Gutters. I hope our recommendations have inspired you to go out and find some new comics you'll enjoy. Join us next time for a discussion of our selected title, but like every week, we encourage you to read all of the recommended books. In the meantime, please leave us an iTunes review. It really does help new listeners find the show. You can also like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube, and follow us on Twitter at ViewFRTHGutters. Feel free to email us at contact@viewfromthegutters.com. Please send us any questions, comments, or recommendations you might have. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as we post new videos every week. And thanks again for listening. And as always, keep reading.